Ladies and gentlemen, I now have the great honor of introducing you to some amazing American heroes who served their country with honor and dignity in World War II. Would each World War II veteran please stand or wave as I read your name? Mr. Herman Zeitchik. Stormed Utah Beach at H hour on D-Day with the Army's 4th Infantry Division, H hour on D-Day. He fought in the Battle of the Bulge, helped liberate Paris, and helped liberate Dachau. Mr. James Elsner Beirant. Served as a signalman first class with the US Navy and landed on Juno Beach on D-Day with a tank landing ship. He brought supplies to Omaha Beach on subsequent days. Mr. Dick Bailey. Served with the 322nd Bomber Group, 450th Bomb Squadron in the European Theatre of Operations. He flew 3 missions over Omaha Beach on D-Day. Mr. George Richard Peterson served as a staff sergeant with the US Army Air Forces. Mr. Donald McKee was a member of the 29th Infantry Division and took part in the invasion of Normandy D+1. Mr. Ralph Waldrop served with the 320th Bomber Group, 440th Bomb Squadron in the European Theatre of Operations. Mr. Irvin Powell served with the 391st Bomber Group, 572nd Bomb Squadron in the European Theatre of Operations. Mr. Larry Thorpe served with the 397th Bomb Group, 598th Bomb Squadron in the European Theatre of Operations. Mr. Charles Lawrence Wheeler served as a captain in the US Army Air Forces, where he was a test pilot. He served in the Pacific Theatre of Operations. Mr. Jose Baldonado served as a rifle marksman with the US Marine Corps. A rifle marksman. He served in the Pacific Theatre of Operations, where he took part in Saipan, Okinawa, Okinoshima campaigns. Mr. David Wallman served as an air traffic controller at Thorpe Abbotts, England, with the 412th Air Service Group. He assisted with flight operations on D-Day. Wilbur Williams served with the US Navy on the USS Doran and the USS Jeffers. With the Jeffers, he participated in the invasions of Sicily, Normandy, southern France, and swept mines in the Pacific. Mr. Biliardo Blair served as a corporal with the US Army in Germany. Mr. Francis Oakes enlisted into the US Navy in 1944 at 17 years old. He was assigned to the USS Ticonderoga as a 20mm gunner as Coxswain 3rd Class. Today, Mr. Oakes is here honoring his good friend, D-Day veteran Mr. George Krakowski, who passed away this year at 99 years old. We are grateful that Mr. Krakowski's family is also with us here today. Mr. Bill Spurrier served with the 397th Bomber Group, 598th Bomb Squadron in the European Theatre of Operations. Mr. Eli Linden landed at Omaha Beach 3 weeks after D-Day, where he was injured. Later, he was captured and held as a German POW. Mr. Irv Cook served with the 397th Bomber Group, 599th Bomb Squadron in the European Theatre of Operations. Mr. John Rossman served with the US Army. He landed on Utah Beach on D-Day +5 and took part in the Battle of Northern France. Colonel Warren Halstead was a US Army Air Forces pilot with the 437th Troop Carrier Group and dropped 82nd Airborne Division paratroopers on D-Day. Mr. Lawrence Talamanti served as a Petty Officer Second Class in the US Navy. He was stationed in the Pacific Theatre of Operations, where he worked as a supply specialist. Mr. Dennis Firk served as a Staff Sergeant with the US Army's 23rd Infantry Division in the Pacific Theatre of Operations. Mr. Lou Peroni served as a ball turret gunner on the B-17 Flying Fortress. He flew 32 missions with the 533rd Bomb Squadron as part of the 8th Air Force. Judge William H. Webster served in the US Navy in the Pacific during World War II, and he again served in Korea. He later was a reservist, and at 95, he says he is still prepared to serve again if needed. Mr. Alfred Henry Bay served as a Staff Sergeant on Guadalcanal, Solomon Islands, in an amphibious truck company, Dux. Mr. Philip Herrera served as a technician 5th grade with the US Army's 717th Tank Battalion in the European Theatre of Operations. Mr. Ellis Williamson served with the 397th Bomber Group, 599th Bomb Squadron in the European Theatre of Operations. Mr. John F. Nagel II served as an aviation radio man, 2nd class with the US Navy. Mr. James Morgan Keel served as a seaman 1st class gunner on the SS John Chandler with the US Navy. He participated in the D-Day landings at Normandy 75 years ago today. Mr. Anthony H. Grant served in the Quartermaster Corps in Europe, arriving in Normandy a month after the D-Day landings. He also fought in the Korean War and retired as a major in 1962. Mr. Thomas Frederick Kissinger served as a pilot with the US Navy. Mr. Helmut Fred Bohm served with the 479th Motor Ambulance Company and was deployed to Normandy, France in July 1944, where he first saw action as the US Army fought through the hedgerows. Mr. Patsy Louis Del Vecchio served as a corporal with the US Marine Corps. Mr. Robert Levine served with the 90th Division and landed on Utah Beach as part of the Normandy invasion. He was later captured and held as a German POW.